What's up, Josie and The Podcast? This is a shorty episode. It's happening. Had to take a little breather a couple weeks ago because I was in the throes of preparing for a annual international conference called NASPA. That's been my professional association home since I was a kiddo in grad school. And I did a lot of sessions, and it was in my backyard of Los Angeles. I had 3 ed sessions and this kind of keynote-esque TED Talk craziness that I did with my partner in crime and husband, Lloyd. I'm going to include all those sessions in the show notes. I'm not going to get way deep down into it. You should catch probably a future blog post or newsletter that I'm going to include all kinds of goodies about those sessions. But it definitely brought up some thoughts about the content creation process, especially that talk that I did with Lloyd. It was called Epic Rap Battles of Higher Ed History. And this thing took a lot to prepare for. We literally wrote out a rap battle. That is right. This woman rap battled on stage. You should catch it. We got a live stream of it. It's on my Facebook page, Dr. Josie Ahlquist. You can find it. And spoiler, hint alert, we are going to upload the recording of that battle to this podcast. So just you wait. And that was the first time that Lloyd and I ever got on stage together to do something like that. And going through the creation process with both collaborating with someone, period, but let alone someone who you live and breathe and love with. It was cool. It was a really cool experience that I'm excited to share with you all. But today, as the title of this shorty is confidence and that content creation process. Because I get the question a lot about if I'm nervous before I get on stage. I'm really not talking about the stage presence and once you're on that stage, even though that's kind of the outcome of it. I actually get way more nervous in creating the thing that's going to be out there, from a blog post, creating an outline for like this podcast episode, writing that rap battle, and the main points that we were going to hit upon. That's when my nerves come out, and sort of these like fraudy feelings and self-doubt and imposter. But when I'm actually doing the thing, I feel like I've worked through all that. But I wanted to tell you a few examples of how I'm really trying to embrace myself as a content creator. Obviously, I have this podcast. I've been blogging for a long time. The book's coming. But I'm really trying to embrace and own that, and also own the journey that I have gone through and that I still go through to get there. Because I'm also trying to inspire future content creators that don't yet see themselves in that light, and or to encourage especially my colleagues who I think have just magical essence and stories to them, and knowledge and expertise that I don't think they're seeing how that could live out in these digital spaces as well as physical ways, like at a conference or at your campus. And so I will scroll back the clock to my early content creator days on a platform that you probably may not even known that I have some blog posts out there, because I sure don't promote it. But I first started blogging on Tumblr. I was getting to be in a place where I was pretty burnt out in a job, and also just I'd kind of peaked, you could say. I was in student activities, and I'd reached that place where I was feeling like I was an expert in that area. And as a learner, as this futuristic, innovative mind of mine, I needed a new challenge. And it was the year that there happened to be, it was leap year. And so every day in February, and because there was an extra day, I would blog every day on Tumblr. And it was just from who I was and what my goals were that year, to a cooking class my husband and I went to silly things, honestly. I didn't really promote it very much. This was, it had to have been like 2010 or 11 or something. It was just almost like an exercise. Even those that I knew nobody except my mom was going to read was a little bit of a grueling process to actually get it out of me. That wasn't even a taste of then a few years later, where I came back to blogging when I was in my first year of my doc program, I also left my full-time job just a couple semesters into that program. I had an opportunity to become a research associate and go full-time, but I was also quite terrified that I would be bored. I needed more substance in my life, and I didn't want to write about what I was doing in my program quite yet. So I set this additional ambitious goal that I was going to blog every day for 50 days. And I don't recommend that y'all do any kind of crazy goals like that. But this was where the realization really was, because now this had to have been 2012 or 13, I think right at 13. And I was starting to be active on Twitter. I was posting things more on different social places. And I was starting to realize not really this huge viewership, but I became a bit more crippled through the creation process, worrying about what it was going to be perceived as. And I always joke that I'm an educator. I have my doctorate in education, but not in English. So heck, I wouldn't be surprised in certain show notes or blog posts that I still have some little grammatical errors. And that's why I put good people around me and invest into great editors to help me through that process. But so I was always like reading through my blogs like a million times over, and I still would put it out and there'd be an edit or an error that someone, like very graciously and kindly would tell me about, but I would take it very, very personal. Just giving that as an example of, it seems so simple to tell someone, just start to blog, like write your ideas and reflections, and you may see the amount of blogs that I've written over the years. And I just want you to know, based upon that type of content, even today, I have a blog that I've been working on literally for months. It's turning basically into a white paper. I hope by the time this comes out, it should be out very, very soon. It's on community colleges and the way that I see that those leaders and institutions are using social media in really great ways. But I also have a tendency to go really, really long and substantive, which is hilarious why this series is called Shorty episodes, because I can't even seem to make these super short, which is just kind of comical. That to say, I sometimes get in my own way of creating content, and I want to share that story to recognize for you if you ever are feeling in the throes of that process, and to know that you are not alone. That for me, pushing publish does feel sometimes terrifying, and the need to, and maybe just having confidence, that's kind of a cop-out way of saying, you have to be confident to do this. There's other descriptor words that you may need to cultivate in yourself, from bravery, from curiosity, whatever kind of word helps connect the dots for you, that gives it credit to say that the creative process isn't simple. It is personal. And just like this podcasting platform has also been a personal journey for me, which is the second story that I want to share. I love seeing so many new podcasts coming out from institutional-based individuals, businesses, to just a group of friends deciding to push record. And there are certain formats that allow you just to get those out there and get them going. And others like mine, I have put a lot more bells and whistles to them and editing processes. But I started this podcast, if you were to go back to the very first one, honestly, even probably less than a year ago, I was still very controlled in my creation process, from the way that I wrote interview questions to even my shorty episodes. I've explained before that I wrote out what I was going to say. And right now, so you can have the picture of how I'm writing and creating this shorty episode, is I just have a really light outline and I'm just trying to let the words come. So they may not be perfect, right? But I hope they feel real and they'll resonate with you. And podcasting has a lot of bells and whistles to actually be able to produce a content series like this. For me, it continues to be a way, though, despite the work, that it's worth it. And so you always have to kind of weigh that balance. And what I do like about now this way that I'm creating podcasts is I almost can't let myself get in the way, that I just have to push record on that interview that I'm doing, on these shorty episodes, and just let the words and the experience come. And even in the way that I'm summarizing interviews afterwards, after those main episodes, I'm trying to make it much more conversational. And it feels so much better. So this is also a moment of pause, is the way that you're creating, maybe whether it's a digital piece of something or some initiative on your campus or a project within your community or your church, is, are we overly preparing our way out of things? That's how I've sometimes pushed the creative process to a place that then has slowed things down. And I think if I was to really unpack a lot of it, it relates back to me wondering about quality, lacking a little bit of that ownership, and then going back to this bigger theme of this episode is how we really have to recognize and honor the confidence and content creation process. And what I would also say, if all of this you're like, Jose, I don't want to create now that you're telling me what you go through, is the discovery process of self. While it may get rattled a little bit as you are openly sharing and creating content, it's going to come across twofold. The more that I find that I share and I adjust, and even if I make a misstep or mess up, is that I have grown and I have found my voice. But then there's also times that I have found the content creation process isn't a good place for me where I am in my life. So, for example, take Twitter during, like Novembers, pretty much every November or October. If you live in the U.S. and the election cycles that we get in, there are certain times where I decide not to be an active consumer or contributor in those places because I have to step away and realize what it might be depleting me from. There's also been times when I've removed myself intentionally from platforms like Instagram, when I catch myself going into patterns that don't feel true to me. And those are things that nobody else but you are going to be able to really tap into your true kind of like intuition and gut about how you're feeling when you go on the platform, what you do there, and how you feel different when you leave. Because all those platforms are ways and places that you can create. You can be that creator, but you also have to be the orchestrator of how you exist in those places, so then it doesn't start to deconstruct then how you feel when you are creating. The other piece of this creative process that's related to confidence is this whole other slice of me creating this darn book that I've talked about numerous times, especially this last year on the podcast. This book proposal, I think it went in like in 2016. It's been literally years in the making, and I have modified my timeline so many times that my publisher are just their saints. I have been very critical of myself, as well as learning to be very forgiving. Because it's taken longer, now I get to feature new people that I didn't even know about. So you can also celebrate ways that we may have thought things could have gone in a certain direction or at a certain pace, and we realized the world was actually slowing us down for certain reasons. So I also want you to be open to the energies of when the creative process comes and goes, and adjust your sails accordingly. So even this podcast, I have had so many hiccups with guests. I love my guests that I've had on this podcast, but there have been times within a week I've had to reschedule or replace someone 3 times in a week. And this just happens, right? When you're trying to get on very busy campus leaders or folks that are really well known in the industry, I'm kind of at the whim, and I totally get that. So if I was to give you some takeaways for ways that you could get out of your head, out of your own way, and I jokingly put in parentheses, without wine, I'm talking about good red Zinfandel, but you don't need it. I just really love red Zinfandel. Well, here's some tactics, some takeaways if you are considering a podcast or a blog or a book or a new Instagram series, or maybe you've come to a head or you're burnt out on a project that you've been doing. I came up with a few things that work for me that have been ways in the past or currently that I have found helpful in getting out of my own way, out of my head, in a healthy way. So the first one is start with a question. Be an explorer and wanting to solve a problem. So what is a topic that you are just so geeked about, or an answer that it seems like nobody else on your campus or in your organization seems to have a clear understanding of? That could be a rationale for why you'd want to create some type of content around that. The second one is, especially if you're feeling caught up on, well, what is it that I would write about or have a podcast about or do on this Instagram account, is who are the people that you are most magnified to, you are attracted to? They're your mentors, they're your role models, they influence you. And what's a way that you could find themes beyond and between all of them in a way that showcases them? So one way that really helped me figure out my voice, I started a series at the same time I started to blog about social media and higher ed, is I started a series called The Art of Doing. And I featured in-depth interviews with women who I found all had unique ways of living, honestly, their art of doing this life. And they were very long form blog post interviews of them. And that really helped me find my voice. But my heart just felt like it exploded every time I got to share their stories. And now the evolution of that has been on the podcast and featuring campus leaders. Another way that you can maybe be inspired to create a remix content as a content creator is think about all that content you've already created that you may just not call it that word content. For example, a presentation that you did at a conference, a paper you wrote in grad school, a really long post that you wrote on Instagram or Facebook could actually be existing content. And this is how I really got my spark in blogging, is I started to realize things I was writing in my doctoral program could be remixed to be digested in different types of digital content. The most popular way at the time was blogging. And so I would take parts of my papers and make them blog posts. And that was my start. I also, now that LinkedIn has blogging, and that's not new, but I ain't got time. I don't have time to write 2 posts for each, even though sometimes I do. But there might be a post that works really well on my blog, or it didn't work well on my blog, and I put it over on LinkedIn, and it's way more received. And it's interesting to see the different patterns there. And I've seen people do this with Medium too, that they might place content they've created elsewhere on different platforms, again, like a Medium. So think about that. Existing content, and then where can you take even content you've already published and repurpose it in different places? I would also say pay attention to what format feels really natural to you. And I gave an example earlier about how I used to format my podcast with my guests or these shorty episodes. And the more I'm allowing them to be organic and flow, even though we have a structure, we have an outline, we have questions, I have topics, it kind of allows my personality to come out. I do think, especially with where podcasting is going, that's where listeners are enjoying much more. And where this comes out for me with blogging is I don't blog as often, but I do make them more substantive. I'm okay making a much longer blog than a whole bunch of shorter ones. And that feels good to me, that I would rather make those really cornerstone pieces that almost, again, like feel like a white paper or a journal article, because you get really a lot of meat out of those. But for you, maybe you're much more energized by smaller bits of content, listicles, which I do once in a while. So play around with that. When you're creating something, what format tends to bring you energy and excitement? And again, like really pay attention to that, how you're feeling through that process, and try to gravitate toward those ways and being that really kind of brings you to life. 2 more is find your flow state. For me, this has been huge on environment. There are certain days and times that I can work well in my house, but for the book, I have had to get the heck out of Dodge. I have taken a spot at a local WeWork, which is a co-working space. The hours fly by and the pages and edits fly by in that space. Versus when I'm at home, it is stop and go. Versus if I'm working on a podcast or a blog or certain things I know I can do on an airplane or at a hotel. So really get to know environmentally where you do the best creating. This may also mean you need to turn certain things off, from music to Wi-Fi to apps. Know what triggers take you out of your flow, and be super protective of yourself and your time to know when and where to get you in that flow, but also be gracious to yourself, because you can only exist in that flow and that creative space so long before you need a break. And that's my last suggestions in this confidence and the creation process. Is I'm recording this right now. I might sound a little bit different. It's because I am sick and I have pushed myself to a place. I know this is partially my fault. Okay. I'm not always the greatest person to set like, okay, it's time to clock out. My husband and I are both going to work on this. We're going to try to be better about having certain weekdays in the evenings off and at least one weekend day off. Did I say that right? Weekend day. One of those Saturdays and Sundays we're going to take off. I swear. I have found you cannot coffee and wine and chocolate and a really good co-working space is not going to refuel your creative energies. The only way to do that is to shut off, shut down, and take a break. So those are a few of my suggestions for those that are looking for creative outlets, trying to find that new energy, and just lessons learned from myself. I wanted to give a few shout outs to start to end this shorty episode, which of course is not that short. It's okay. Of content creators out there that I would love for you to check out. And these are going to be all listed in the show notes, all different types of professionals and people and tools as we start to look at what it really means to be a content creator that can show up in all kinds of different spaces. So for example, there is an Instagram account called at firstgen_juice, which is a account that's featuring all first-gen students who are well-known in the media, celebrities, that you may not even realize, and it kind of tells their story in the grid. So you should definitely check that out. Tim Zagleski, he is always posting on Medium constantly, the greatest blogs. I'll make sure to link to him. Mordecai Brownlee, he has a video series on YouTube, and he also posts those on LinkedIn. Ashley Budd, she has this really cool newsletter series. She's a social media strategist, marketing communications pro. But her newsletter, she also doesn't take it too seriously. It's almost like a letter to a friend that also includes resources. So I'll include how to subscribe to that. There's also Twitter threads. So you obviously have Twitter posts, but you can add threads under posts. And my good friend Liz Gross does these all the time. And for example, you could be at one keynote, let's say at a conference, and instead of individual Twitter posts, you could put them all in the same thread. So someone that stumbles onto that one tweet could easily find all of your highlights that you took away from some kind of workshop or keynote or podcast that you listened to. I've been playing around with a whole lot more Facebook long posts. So you can catch these at Dr. Josie Ahlquist on my Facebook page or on my personal page. And they're honestly just long written posts that almost look like blogs. So you can explore those if Facebook feels like a good space for you. I mentioned white papers a couple times. These are pretty common in the educational space, but also want to remix that idea that every darn thing that we do has to be formally published, even though I get it. Faculty need to have those credits. We want to move through those processes, but you could look at the way the Hope Center with Sarah Goldrick Grab, some of their works are done via white papers that are transformed in PDF, so it's timely. It gets it out as soon as possible, and I'll link to one of those as well. You could also look to, as being a content creator, putting out series or like a challenge. So Katie Linder, who has a number of podcasts, she did a challenge on Instagram stories about how it was like a fitness challenge where she was doing a certain amount of miles and time and walking to be active. Because goodness, we all know sometimes being a content creator, we are sitting often. Another way of creating content is pulling people together in a community. And I recently kicked one of these off, not only in my Connected Exec Facebook group, which is for aspiring and current campus executives, from deans, vice presidents, provost presidents. You can go find us there. But I also kicked off a Facebook group. It's hashtag #SAMarcom. So it's Student Affairs Marketing and Communication Professionals. So if you are trying to piece things together in student affairs as a marketing professional, we have a Facebook group finally for you. Another one that I found, though, that I'm a huge fan of and is getting a lot of cool traction is there's a first-gen Facebook group. I think it's called Empowering First-Generation Students, and I'll include the link to that in the show notes as well. I hope any of those inspire you, make you think about being a content creator a little bit differently. And if there are others that you love, please tell me who they are. Tweet at me at Josie Ahlquist, or the podcast is Josie AT Podcast. I would love to know about them, feature them maybe in a future podcast or a blog or a talk that I have coming up. Because the more that you can explore yourself as a creator, whether you're creating now or you have in the past or you want to, we all are creating something, and there's a process to that. And I do think our own sense of self is tightly woven around our creative process. So I hope we can really have this open conversation of what that means, and I'd love to hear how y'all feel about that. Again, hit me up on Twitter. So to close, a final couple thoughts about confidence, the creation process, and this dirty word called perfectionism. Perfectionism has really been the muck that has duct taped my voice from the past. It's not like anyone else is putting these standards and expectations on me, and I get that. So if you are feeling that weight of getting everything right in the creative process, every audio hiccup taken out, every grammatical error corrected, formatting every Instagram story or post so it fits just perfectly, I want you to think just how much more free it would feel and be to let that go. Because I get it, in academics, as administrators, executives, we do have high standards. We push these on ourselves and on our field, but it doesn't replace that we are first good old human beings. So I want to end with a quote from a Nigerian poet and novelist, Ben Okri. The fact of storytelling hints at the fundamental human unease, hints at human imperfection. Where there is perfection, there is no story to tell. So I hope by telling my story and even my continual confidence and creative process, it really shares for you the ups and downs of the creating content process. It invites you into the conversation. It warms you up to telling and documenting your own story because it matters. So this wraps up another shorty episode, giving you a quick dose of social media, philosophy, storytelling, strategy, and all that good old heart and soul stuff about what it means to be a human in the digital age. It's so fun for y'all to check these out. I appreciate your support. You can always say hello, reach out to me at Twitter or on Instagram at Josie Ahlquist, or email me at josie@josieahlquist.com. Until next time, this has been Josie and the Podcast. Please subscribe to Josie and the Podcast so you don't miss any future episodes, and click that share button to share with your colleagues, friends, heck, maybe even your family. I would also be thrilled if you enjoyed the episode to leave a review in iTunes or any of your favorite podcasting platforms. If you're interested in learning more about my speaking, coaching, or consulting work on digital leadership in higher ed, or my research or publishing, check me out at josieahlquist.com. Find me on Twitter or Instagram at Josie Ahlquist. You can also connect with me on Facebook and LinkedIn. Just search my name. Sending digital hugs, loves, and waves to whatever corner of the world you're listening in from. This has been Josie and the Podcast.